The morning started with the kind of sound that rattles coffee mugs and jolts you out of your boots. At first, I thought the rumble shaking the windows was thunder rolling in from the hills. I even stepped onto the porch expecting clouds. Instead, what I saw made me blink twice. The sun was shining, and a yellow bulldozer was clawing a 10-foot trench around my property, like it was constructing a moat around some medieval fortress. The foreman looked down from his cab, face smeared with sweat and diesel dust. "HOA orders, sir!" he yelled over the engine. "No access until dues are paid." I turned a slow circle and took in the absurd sight. The trench cut right through my gravel driveway. My mailbox dangled from its post like a hostage tied to an island of dirt. Across the road, neighbors peered from behind blinds pretending not to spectate the circus. And standing dead center on the far edge of the ditch, framed perfectly in her red blazer and self-satisfaction, was the queen of Ironwood Acres herself, HOA President Karen Whitley. Arms crossed, chin raised, smiling as if she'd finally won. She thought she'd trapped me. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the trap belonged to her. Because I wasn't just another rebellious homeowner. I was the man holding their debt, the invisible leash around their little empire's neck. Before I tell you how that happened, hit that subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. Because this story doesn't end where anyone expected. When I moved back to Ironwood Acres, all I wanted was quiet. My parents' old ranch sat on 3 acres of honest dirt. Oak trees whispering in the wind, a leaning barn, a windmill that groaned on breezy nights, and a porch swing that squeaked like an old friend. It wasn't fancy, but it was real, uncomplicated, steady. For a while, life hummed along just fine. Then the HOA decided quiet was a problem. It started with a letter printed on expensive paper. "Dear resident, your property falls under the jurisdiction of the Ironwood Homeowners Association. Please review our community standards and remit your first annual fee of $120 within 30 days. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my coffee. My father built this house long before Ironwood Acres had paved roads, let alone an HOA. I didn't swim in their pool, use their tennis courts, or read their gossip newsletter. So I mailed back a polite note, not a member, not paying. That's when Karen showed up, in her 50s, armed with a clipboard that might as well have been a scepter, lipstick bold enough to stop traffic, and a personality wedged somewhere between a traffic cop and a headmistress. She marched down my drive, heels crunching on gravel. "Mr. Hayes," she announced, "we need to discuss your non-compliance with HOA standards." "Non-compliance?" I said. "Karen, my home isn't under your HOA." She gave a tight smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "That's where you're mistaken. The new subdivision line places your property within Ironwood Acres governance. It's all in our records." "Show me," I said simply. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Show me your deed, your map. Anything remotely official." All she had was that clipboard and conviction. That day I earned my first $50 fine for unauthorized livestock, because my old mare Daisy had the nerve to exist. Next came a $75 fine for unapproved exterior color. Apparently beige wasn't HOA-approved beige. Then offenses for my windmill, my flagpole, even my mailbox. Within weeks, my kitchen counter looked like a Monopoly board, bright slips of paper, fake money for fake authority. At first, I ignored them. But soon the harassment turned personal. Notices taped to my fence posts, warnings tucked under my wiper blades, voicemails from the so-called compliance committee, which, near as I could tell, was just Karen and her 2 best friends, Rhonda and Jeanette. According to them, I was single-handedly lowering property values. According to me, they were absolutely raising my blood pressure. I tried to shrug it off. Then one evening, I came home to orange spray paint across my driveway. Violation. I washed it off before dinner. But the next morning when I heard the bulldozer, I realized Karen wasn't just flexing. She'd declared war. The foreman leaned from his cab again. "The lady in red says the board approved it," he said. "The board approved trespassing?" I asked. He shrugged. "Sir, I just dig where I'm told." The dozer had sliced straight through the edge of my land, tearing my driveway and half my irrigation line. Mud and water churned where there used to be earth. Karen stood proud above the chaos, clipboard cradled like a victory flag. "Maybe next time you'll answer our letters," she said. I studied her a moment, letting the silence stretch. "You're going to regret this, Karen." "Oh, I don't think so," she purred. "You can't beat an HOA." That's when I smiled. Slow, patient. The kind of smile that means someone ought to worry and doesn't know it yet. Because she was measuring grass while I was holding the title to her castle's drawbridge. See, long before Daisy ever wandered into their bylaws, I'd spent 20 years in real estate finance. I'd cut my teeth buying distressed loans, delinquent developments, unpaid construction projects, the messy stuff banks offload for pennies. When my parents passed, I semi-retired and kept one foot in the business, mostly for fun. A few years earlier, Ironwood Acres had taken out a big loan to build their sparkling new clubhouse and pool. Karen's pride and joy. But the board missed payments. The bank wrote it off. I bought the unpaid note on a whim one late night, barely skimming the paperwork. It gathered dust in a file drawer until that morning when Karen turned my driveway into a moat. By noon, I'd called my lawyer. "Mike," I said, "remember that HOA note we bought 2 years ago?" "Yeah," he chuckled. "Why?" "Because," I said, watching mud fill the trench, "it's time we collected." At first, he thought I was kidding. By sunset, his laughter had vanished. He'd gone through every document, every overdue installment, every clause, and confirmed what I already suspected. Ironwood Acres still owed on that loan, and since I held it, they owed me. "You understand what that means?" Mike asked, equal parts disbelief and delight. "You technically own their debt. You could foreclose on their assets, the clubhouse, the pool, everything." I looked out across the trench where Karen's workers had chewed up half my land. "So the people blocking my driveway are standing on property that's financed by yours truly?" "Exactly." "Then no," I said. "Don't send a default notice yet. Let's make it educational." By dusk, the moon shimmered off the muddy ditch like a mirror. Across the street, Karen's blinds trembled, curiosity fighting common sense. I raised my coffee mug in a mock toast. "Game on," I whispered. Next morning, Ironwood Acres buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Half the neighbors gossiped lovingly about Karen defending the community. The other half whispered that maybe the bulldozer had gone too far. The HOA's Facebook page lit up. "He's a danger to the neighborhood. Karen's protecting us!" I read every comment while sipping coffee, smiling. They had no idea the danger wasn't me. It was the neat stack of legal documents sitting on my desk. Just after sunrise, Mike called. "You're going to love this. 18 missed payments in 4 years. Total default. The transfer paperwork's airtight. Translation? You own them." I leaned back, savoring every word. "How does it feel to be a landlord of self-righteous misery?" He laughed. "Technically, you can seize their assets starting with the clubhouse." "Not yet," I said. "First, I want a front row seat." That afternoon, I walked down to the clubhouse, Karen's kingdom, 3 stories of pretentious white columns and a fountain that hadn't splashed water since last summer. Private property. Members only read the sign on the gate. Karen was there, right on schedule, clipboard underarm, sunglasses flashing, her lieutenants Rhonda and Jeanette flanking her like bodyguards. They looked up when I pushed open the gate. Annoyance creased their freshly moisturized faces. "Mike, you can't be here!" Karen snapped. "Oh, I think I can," I said pleasantly. "Actually, I think I own here," she frowned. "Excuse me?" I handed her a folder, the same kind she loved to weaponize, filled with copies of the promissory note, the payment history, and the transfer deed bearing my name. "These are yours," I said. "Well, technically mine now. The HOA loan you never repaid, I hold that note. So, until further notice, I'll be filing to secure my interest, including this property." She opened the folder, eyes darting across the legal seals. Rhonda gasped. Jeanette's jaw dropped. "That's ridiculous," Karen blurted. "You can't—" "I can," I said, taking my time. "And tomorrow morning, you'll receive formal notice of default. Unless, of course, Ironwood Acres would like to negotiate new terms." She looked up, color draining from her face. "Terms? Let's start," I said, smiling. "With you filling in that trench and washing the mud off my driveway." The silence that followed was sweeter than victory itself. By sunset, the bulldozer was gone. By morning, the ditch was filled, my driveway graded smooth. And by the end of the week, Karen resigned as HOA president, citing personal stress. Sometimes thunder isn't thunder. Sometimes it's the sound of karma starting her engine. They looked like a trio of suburban witches waiting for a sacrifice. I approached with a calm smile. "Ladies," I greeted. Karen's smile froze. "Mr. Hayes, I hope you're here to apologize and pay your dues." I laughed lightly. "Actually, I'm here to collect yours." Her brow furrowed. "Excuse me." I pulled out a manila folder from my briefcase and opened it slowly, theatrically. "You see this clubhouse, this pool, this pretty little fountain? It all sits under a loan the HOA took out 5 years ago. That loan went unpaid. The bank sold it. And guess who bought it?" Karen blinked, her face twitching. "You're bluffing." I handed her the first page, the assignment of debt stamped and notarized. "Read it." Her friends leaned in, whispering. Karen's hand trembled slightly as she scanned the documents. The red in her cheeks deepened into something between anger and panic. This doesn't mean anything, she stammered. You can't just, I interrupted. And I will if you don't remove that trench by the end of the week. Her eyes darted from me to the papers, then back again. You wouldn't dare. I smiled calm as ever. Try me. I turned to leave, but not before saying, You've been so busy digging holes, Karen. I hope you like the view from the bottom. By the next day, the HOA board was in full crisis mode. Emergency meetings, conference calls, frantic emails. Karen's red blazer practically became her uniform of panic. They tried to act tough in public, but inside I knew they were scrambling. Meanwhile, I started documenting everything. Drone shots of the trench, photos of the damaged irrigation lines, recordings of Karen's threats. My lawyer called it overkill. I called it insurance. I even installed a couple of motion-activated cameras by the property line. If they so much as sneezed in my direction, I'd have evidence. But Karen wasn't giving up. Oh no, not her. That weekend, I woke to the sound of hammering. When I stepped outside, there were no trespassing HOA property signs staked along my fence line on my property. I nearly laughed myself sick. I called the sheriff's department. 2 deputies showed up, took one look at the trench, and whistled. They actually did this? One of them asked. Yep, I said. And now they're claiming my land. He scratched his head. This is civil, but man, this is messed up. They took a report anyway. Karen showed up halfway through, ranting about community rights and unauthorized access. The deputy cut her off mid-sentence. Ma'am, he's the property owner. You don't have authority here. You could practically see the steam shooting out of her ears. When they left, she hissed at me. You think you've won? I leaned in slightly and whispered. Karen, I don't think I calculate. The next few days felt like a game of chess. Every time Karen made a move, I countered it with paperwork. She sent letters demanding back dues. I sent certified notices of default and pending foreclosure. She tried to rally the neighborhood against me. I quietly emailed each homeowner attaching the HOA's financial records, public information by the way, that showed every dollar misused, every unpaid debt, and every administrative bonus Karen paid herself. The effect was nuclear. Within 48 hours, the community chat went from gossiping about me to questioning Karen's leadership. People demanded transparency. Some even demanded her resignation. That's when I knew I had her cornered. Still, I wasn't out for blood, just balance. I didn't want to destroy the HOA entirely. I wanted them to learn. But Karen wasn't the type to learn. She was the type to lash out. On the 5th day after my ultimatum, a truck arrived at my gate. A private security company. 3 men in uniform stepped out and began measuring my fence, taking notes. I walked out calmly. Something I can help you with. One of them said, We're here on behalf of the Ironwood HOA. They've filed a safety inspection claim. I laughed. You mean they're trespassing again? They looked uneasy. Sir, we're just following orders. Yeah, I said. That's what Trench Guy said too. I called Mike immediately. Time to move, I told him. File the lien enforcement. We're done being polite. That evening, Mike delivered the paperwork to the HOA board by hand. A notice of intent to foreclose. Legal, binding, irrefutable. When Karen opened the door and saw him, she went pale. This is harassment, she shrieked. Mike smiled politely. No, ma'am. This is debt collection. The next morning, I woke to the sweetest sound imaginable. Silence. The bulldozers were gone. The trench crew had packed up. The signs had vanished. Karen's Facebook group went private, then disappeared. Neighbors started waving at me again, some awkwardly, some apologetically. But I wasn't celebrating yet because I knew people like Karen. They don't surrender, they plot. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got a letter slipped under my door. No stamp, no name. Just typed words on crisp white paper. You may think you've won, but this isn't over. I built this neighborhood and I won't let you tear it down. You don't belong here. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and dropped it in the shredder. Then I poured myself another coffee, sat on the porch, and smiled. Because deep down, Ick knew what she didn't. The more she fought, the deeper she'd dig herself into trouble. And when that happened, I'd be right there watching, waiting, holding the shovel of truth. By the end of that week, Ironwood Acres felt like a ghost town. No kids on bikes, no neighbors jogging, no barbecues, just silence, and the occasional sound of Karen's SUV screeching around the cul-de-sac like a red comet of fury. I knew that silence meant one thing. The board was panicking, and panic always leads to mistakes. Mike called early Monday morning. They tried filing a counterclaim, he said, claiming your lien is invalid because you have a personal interest in the community. I laughed. They're saying I can't collect because I live here. Pretty much, I smiled. Perfect. That means they've officially recognized my property as outside the HOA. Mike paused. You're right. Exactly, I said. Their own argument just killed their jurisdiction. Karen had no idea she'd just walked into her own trap. Later that day, I received a notice taped to my gate, handwritten in Karen's signature looping letters. Notice of board hearing. You are hereby summoned to attend an HOA disciplinary session regarding multiple violations of community standards, including but not limited to obstruction, property damage, and defamation. Failure to attend will result in legal escalation. The irony was almost poetic. I called Mike. We're going, I said. He sighed. You really want to face them in person? Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world. The meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m. at the HOA clubhouse, the same building technically listed under my lien. When we arrived, every board member was there. Karen at the head table, Rhonda and Jeanette flanking her like loyal guards, and 5 other members staring down at us as if we were on trial. The room smelled like burnt coffee and cheap air freshener. A big banner behind Karen read, "Protecting Ironwood's integrity." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. Karen cleared her throat dramatically. Mr. Hayes, she began, we've convened this hearing because your recent actions have endangered the unity of this community. You've posted defamatory content online, refused to comply with HOA regulations, and I raised a hand. Karen, you forgot the part where you dug a moat around my house. She slammed her palm on the table. This is our meeting, not yours. Mike leaned forward calmly. Actually, Mrs. Whitley, you're holding this meeting in a building that's under a defaulted lien owned by my client. Technically, this is his property until your association pays the outstanding balance. The room went dead silent. Karen blinked, her lips tightening. That's absurd. You can't prove Mike reached into his briefcase and laid down a stack of documents thick enough to stun a moose. Here's the deed of trust, the assignment of rights, and the full payment history. Well, lack thereof. The HOA owes $42.30 in principal plus interest. Rhonda gasped. Jeanette whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Karen's voice cracked. You can't enforce that, I smiled. I don't need to. You're doing that for me. She glared at me, face flushed crimson. What do you want, Hayes? Simple, I said. Fill the trench, fix my property, and stop pretending you run my life. You have 7 days. If not, I start foreclosure. The sheriff's office will auction this clubhouse, your pool, and that fancy sign out front. The board erupted in chatter. A few members were clearly terrified. Others looked betrayed. One elderly man stood up, pointing at Karen. You told us we were detri. You said everything was handled. Karen shot him a death glare. Sit down, George. Mike gathered the papers back into his case. You have until Friday, 5 p.m., he said. After that, the law moves on its own. We stood to leave. I turned to Karen and said, You should have just knocked on my door instead of digging a hole. The sound of the door closing behind us was the sweetest music I'd heard all week. The next few days were chaos. Karen launched a desperate PR campaign handing out flyers calling me a hostile investor and a threat to Ironwood values. She even emailed residents claiming I was weaponizing the legal system to dismantle their community. It backfired spectacularly. One by one, homeowners started showing up at my door, not to complain, but to apologize. They'd been fined for ridiculous reasons. A garden gnome, a mismatched curtain color, a car parked slightly crooked. They'd had enough. I hosted an informal meeting in my barn that Saturday. About 20 neighbors came, some nervous, some angry. An older woman named Mrs. Dalton spoke first. She fined me $200 because my grandson's bike left marks on the sidewalk. A man in his 30s added, She towed my truck while I was at work. Said it was non-compliant paint. It's factory color. The stories poured out like floodwater. By the end of it, everyone agreed they were done being afraid of Karen. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't sleeping. I could tell every night her porch light flickered on and off like a warning signal. Her SUV came and went at odd hours. Rumor had it she was meeting with a new lawyer, a real bulldog type. Mike wasn't worried. If she wants to fight on paper, she's already lost, he said. Still, I knew Karen's pride wouldn't let her quit quietly. That Friday morning, she showed up unannounced, stomping down my driveway like a storm cloud. Her hands trembled as she shoved a letter toward me. I've filed for an injunction. And she hissed, You're not touching HOA property. I'll see you in court. I took the paper and skimmed it. It was laughable, riddled with procedural errors. Half the signatures missing. Karen, this isn't even valid, I said gently. Her voice cracked. You think you're better than everyone, don't you? Just because you have money? I sighed. No, Karen, I just know how to read a contract. She glared at me for a long second, then stormed off heels, digging into the gravel. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of pity and inevitability. I didn't hate her. In a twisted way, I understood her people like Karen need control the way others need air. But when they lose it, they suffocate. That night, Mike called with an update. We filed the foreclosure motion with the county. He said they have 72 hours to respond. I poured myself a drink and looked out over the moonlit trench, still scarring my property. The windmill creaked softly, the night bugs humming like an orchestra. 72 hours, I murmured. That's all it takes to turn a queen into a pawn. Mike chuckled on the other end. You sound poetic for a man in a war zone. War zones are where poetry comes from, I said, half smiling. The following morning I woke to find something new at the trench. A banner. Big red letters reading property of Ironwood Ho. Trespassers will be reported. Karen had struck again petty to the very end. Isaged took a picture and sent it to Mike. Evidence added to the file. He replied within minutes. Already ahead of you. At that moment I realized something. This wasn't just about money or property lines. It was about principle. The HOA system at its core was supposed to create order, but in the wrong hands it turned into tyranny. And the only way to break tyranny was to show the tyrant the mirror. And that mirror was coming soon in the form of a court summons. The countdown had begun. 7 days earlier, Karen had smirked when she thought I was powerless. Now she'd be standing in front of a judge, explaining why the private trench she ordered was carved into land she didn't own. As I turned back toward my house, I caught my reflection in the window, calm, steady, and a little older than I remembered. Almost over, I whispered to myself. But I was wrong. The storm hadn't even started yet. The first sign that things were spiraling came not from Karen herself, but from the HOA's Facebook group, or what was left of it. Overnight, someone leaked the foreclosure notice I'd filed to the public page. By morning, every resident in Ironwood Acres had seen it. The comment section was a digital riot. Wait, the HOA owes money, so the clubhouse isn't even ours. Karen said the loan was paid off last year. Is this guy Hayes serious about owning the HOA's debt? It was like watching a suburban coup unfold online. Karen tried to contain the fire by posting one of her trademark all-caps announcements. Do not believe online rumors. OA is financially stable. Mr. Hayes is spreading misinformation to discredit the board, but it was too late. Once the internet smells blood, there's no stopping it. Screenshots of her past financial updates, the ones claiming the HOA had a zero-debt policy, were already circulating. Neighbors began comparing notes, realizing their dues had mysteriously increased while community maintenance decreased. By noon, 2 local news stations had reached out to me for interviews. I wasn't looking for fame, but I was looking for accountability. So, I gave them the facts calmly, without exaggeration. The HOA took out a loan for community development, I told the reporter. They defaulted. I legally acquired the debt. Now, instead of fixing the problem, they've chosen to intimidate homeowners, including digging a trench around my property. The reporter blinked. Wait, they actually dug a trench? I pointed toward the muddy moat visible behind me, still there. That evening, Ironwood Acres became a circus. News vans lined the streets. Drones buzzed overhead. Karen tried to shoo reporters away, shouting that they were trespassing on private HOA land. But every camera turned to her, capturing her flushed face and trembling hands. When one journalist asked if the HOA was insolvent, she snapped, "Of course not. This man is delusional." Meanwhile, I just stood by my mailbox, coffee in hand, watching it all unfold like a bad reality show. Within hours, the video went viral. The headline read, "Local ho dug a moat around homeowner's house. Now hours him hundreds of thousands." The comment section was pure gold. You can't spell hole without ho. Finally, a man who fights back that Karen just made HOA stand for hold on attorney. Karen must have spent the entire night drafting her next move because by the next morning, an email went out to all residents. It was titled "An Urgent Message from HOA President." It was 8 paragraphs of finger-pointing and denial. She accused me of financial blackmail, claimed I forged documents, and said I was a disgruntled investor exploiting legal loopholes. She even tried to discredit me personally. Mr. Hayes has a history of aggressive property dealings and has chosen to target our peaceful community for his own gain. Mike read the email and burst out laughing. Aggressive property dealings? What are you, apparat? I smirked. Apparently a trench pirate. Then he got serious. She's losing it. This is classic deflection. She's trying to make you the villain because she can't control the narrative anymore. Then it's time we finish this publicly. I said we decided to hold a community Q&A session open to all Ironwood residents at the county courthouse auditorium. Neutral ground, no HOA banners, no Karen's clipboard. The turnout shocked even me. Dozens of homeowners showed up clutching printouts of their fines, invoices, and HOA letters. Karen arrived last flanked by her loyal duo, Rhonda and Jeanette, wearing the same crimson blazer she'd worn the day she ordered the trench. Mike began calmly. "We're not here for drama. We're here for facts. The HOA owes a substantial debt. That debt is held by my client, Mr. Hayes. These are public records available to anyone." He clicked a slide onto the projector, The official county-recorded loan documents stamped with dates, signatures, and most importantly, the HOA's name. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen stood up. This is misrepresentation. Those records are outdated. Mike scrolled to the next slide. A notice of non-payment dated 3 months prior. Silence, he continued. Under state law, a defaulted HOA loan grants the creditor rights to lien and foreclosure proceedings on association-owned property. My client has every legal right to enforce those terms. Karen's face turned scarlet. He's threatening to steal our community. I stood then, keeping my voice even. I don't want your community, Karen. I just want you to stop pretending you own mine. The room erupted in murmurs, some supportive, some stunned. A man in the front row, Mr. Dalton, raised his hand. Is it true you used our dues to pay for those landscaping contracts that never happened? Karen froze. Another voice. And what about the security cameras that were supposed to go up last year? And another. You fined me $300 for my mailbox? Where did that money go? Her composure shattered. Enough, she barked. You're all ungrateful. Without me, this place would fall apart. The room fell deadly quiet. Then Mrs. Dalton, an elderly widow who'd lived there since the 80s, whispered, Maybe it should. Karen's eyes darted around, realizing she'd lost them, all of them. The meeting ended with the board voting to place Karen on administrative leave. She stormed out mid-vote, slamming the door so hard one of the ceiling tiles dropped loose. Outside, she cornered me near the parking lot. You think this is over? She spat. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I looked her dead in the eye. You embarrassed yourself. I just held up the mirror. She trembled, pointing a shaking finger. You'll regret this. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Then she drove off tires, squealing. I watched her go, feeling the mix of satisfaction and caution that comes when you know you've won the battle. But not the war. The next day, the county inspector arrived with orders to evaluate the trench. After a full survey, he declared it a public safety hazard and issued an immediate removal order. Karen's replacement, a timid accountant named Ben, called me personally. Mr. Hayes, we've decided to comply. The trench will be filled by tomorrow. I thanked him. Good choice. By sunset, heavy machinery returned, but this time to undo what had been done. As I watched the dirt pour back into the gaping wound around my property, I felt something shift. Not just the soil, the balance of power. For months, Karen had used fear to control everyone. But now, the same people who once followed her blindly were whispering about audits, resignations, and refunds. Still, something in me couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't finished. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. Enjoy your victory, Robert. Some holes go deeper than you think. No signature, but I didn't need one. I stared at the message for a long moment before locking my phone and stepping onto the porch. The trench was gone, but the memory of it still cut through the ground like a scar. I took a deep breath, looking up at the stars. Karen had lost control, but people like her rarely go quietly. And sure enough, what came next would make the trench look like child's play, because I was about to find out just how deep her lies really went. 2 days after the trench was filled, Ironwood Acres looked deceptively peaceful again. The lawns were trimmed, kids were back on their bikes, and neighbors who once whispered behind curtains were now waving like they hadn't been part of a suburban mutiny. On the surface, it looked like the calm after a storm, but anyone who's lived through one knows the air feels too still before the next wave hits. And in my gut, I knew the storm wasn't done. Mike confirmed it the next morning with a short, grim text. She's lawyering up. Of course she was. Karen Whitley wasn't the type to fade quietly into HOA history. She was the type to light the filing cabinet on fire and call it victory. By noon, we got the paperwork, a 30-page complaint filed in county court. The accusations were ridiculous. Defamation, harassment, intentional emotional distress. She even claimed I'd caused her sleeplessness and anxiety by undermining her community authority. Mike nearly spit his coffee. You can't make this stuff up. Oh, she can, I said. She's been doing it for years. But beneath the absurdity was something dangerous. She wasn't doing this alone. Her new attorney, Gregory Falk, was a notorious bulldog who made his living off HOA disputes. I knew his type: loud, expensive, and proud of it. We had to respond fast. The next morning, we walked into the Ironwood HOA's emergency board meeting, summoned by Karen's remaining allies. The clubhouse was packed: board members, homeowners, and even a local reporter pretending to check her phone in the back row. Karen was there too, of course, sitting at the head of the table like a dethroned monarch, refusing to abdicate. Her red blazer was replaced with navy blue, her serious legal color, no doubt. Falk sat beside her, oozing confidence. Mike and I took our seats across from them. Karen smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Mr. Hayes, she began sweetly. Thank you for coming. I believe we can resolve this civilly. Civilly? I echoed. You dug a trench around my home. She ignored that. We've decided to settle this matter internally within the board. You'll retract your foreclosure notice, remove your online posts, and publicly apologize for defaming this association. I blinked. Defaming Falk leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, your actions have caused significant reputational harm to this community. The viral videos, the media coverage, all of that reflects poorly on Ironwood Acres. I smiled thinly. You mean it reflects poorly on her? Karen slammed her hand on Thatable. You ruined my reputation. I leaned in. No, Karen. You ruined it the day you turned a neighborhood into your personal empire. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Falk tried to regain control. Regardless, we're prepared to offer you a settlement provided you release all liens and agree not to pursue foreclosure. Mike raised an eyebrow. And what's your offer? Falk smiled smugly. We'll pay you $2,000 and consider this closed. I laughed loudly. Karen's jaw tightened. What's so funny, Karen? I said, still smiling. The HOA owes me $400,000 and you're offering me $20,000 in a handshake. Her nostrils flared. That's all you'll get. You're bluffing about that debt, and we both know it. Mike slid a document across the table. Actually, we do know it because it's right here. It was a notarized county record showing the loan's full balance and the HOA's name in bold. Karen's confidence evaporated like steam. The room erupted into chaos. Board members began talking over one another. A woman in the back shouted, "You told us it was paid off." Another man slammed his folder shut. "You made us vote to raise dues to cover landscaping." Where did the money go, Karen? Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an ally. Rhonda and Jeanette looked ready to sink into their chairs. This is out of context, Karen shouted. I did what was best for Ironwood. I stood slowly. You did what was best for you, she pointed at me, voice trembling with rage. You're the reason this community is falling apart. I took a step closer. No, Karen. I'm their reason it's finally standing up. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. For the first time since this war began, Karen didn't have a comeback. That's when Mike placed a manila envelope on the table. As of this morning, he said the county has approved foreclosure proceedings. If your association doesn't satisfy the debt in 10 business days, Mr. Hayes will legally acquire the HOA's assets. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Rhonda whispered. You said we had time, Jeanette mumbled. You said the loan was settled. Karen's hand began to shake. This is manipulation. It's a setup. I looked her in the eye. No, Karen, it's accountability. Then something unexpected happened. One of the younger board members, a guy named Andrew, stood up and faced the crowd. I move that we remove Karen Whitley as HOA president effective immediately. You could have heard a pin drop. Another voice joined second dead. Karen's face went white. You can't do this. The board voted one by one. 5 in favor, 2 opposed. It was over. Karen pushed back her chair so hard it screeched. You're all cowards, she screamed. You'll regret this. Then she grabbed her purse, stormed toward the door, and slammed it so hard that the window rattled. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then slowly, the room broke into applause. It wasn't for me. It wasn't even for the board. It was for the fact that finally, Ironwood Acres belonged to its residents again, not its dictator. Later that night, Mike and I sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the oaks. She'll appeal, he said. I know, but she's done, he added. Public opinion's gone. The debt's clear. There's nowhere for her torn. I nodded, but part of me didn't believe it. People like Karen never think they've lost. They just look for new angles. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was an email from an anonymous sender. Subject, you don't know what she's capable of. Attached was a single PDF file. A scanned document labeled Ironwood Loan Amendment Confidential. I opened it. My stomach dropped. It showed a new signature page dated just 2 months ago with Karen's signature under a refinancing agreement. But here's the catch. The property owner listed wasn't the Ironwood HOA. It was a company called Whitley Development LLC, and the signature witnesses were forged. I leaned back, exhaling sharply. Oh my God, Mike looked at me. What is it? I turned the laptop toward him. She didn't just mismanage the HOA, she stole it. Hestered at the screen, stunned. That's felony fraud. I nodded slowly, the weight of it settling in. She's not done, I said quietly. She's just getting desperate. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Real thunder this time. And I knew the next battle wasn't going to be about land or money or pride. It was going to be about the law. And this time, Karen wasn't just facing me. She was facing justice. The morning after discovering the fraudulent document, I woke up before sunrise. The air felt heavy thick with that kind of silence that sits on your shoulders. Even the birds were quiet. My first instinct was to tell Mike, but when I checked my phone, he had already texted me. Meet me at the county recorder's office. Bring coffee. We've got something. Something. That word sent a chill down my spine. I drove through the still sleepy streets of Ironwood Acres. past the houses that Karen once ruled like a queen. The trench was gone now, grass already starting to grow where it once cut through the land. But even with the dirt filled in, you could still see the scar, a faint outline like the neighborhood's own memory of fear. At the recorder's office, Mike was already there. Papers spread across the table like puzzle pieces. "You're not going to believe this," he said as I handed him a cup of black coffee. "Try me," I muttered. Hess slid over a document with the county seal stamped on top. Karen's company, Whitley Development LLC, filed a quitclaim deed 2 months ago. She transferred the HOA's assets into her company's name. I frowned, but she can't. The HOA is a nonprofit corporation. You can't just transfer property like that. Mike nodded grimly. Exactly, which means it's fraudulent. She forged the other board members' signatures. He showed me the comparison reel signatures from old meeting minutes versus the new ones on the deed. The forgeries weren't even subtle. One was spelled wrong. "So she tried to make herself the owner of the HOA," I said, slowly piecing it together. "That means she tried to move the debt off the association and into her own fake company." Right. Mike confirmed. She refinanced with a private lender to cover the debt, but never filed it with the county. Probably hoped to cash out before anyone noticed. I ran a hand over my face, and now that we filed foreclosure, she's cornered. We exchanged a look that said what neither of us wanted to say aloud. Karen Whitley was about to go down hard. That same afternoon, Mike and I met with the county investigator, a non-nonsense guy named Detective Rowan. He wore a faded gray suit and carried a leather notebook that looked older than both of us. So Rowan said, flipping through the pages, "Let me get this straight. This HOA president transferred all of the community's property to her own LLC forged board signatures and tried to refinance the loan you own." "That's the gist," Mike said. Rowan whistled softly. "That's not civil anymore. That's criminal fraud. Maybe even racketeering if she collected dues under false pretenses." He looked up at me. "Mr. Hayes, you willing to testify if this goes to court?" I nodded without hesitation. "After what she's done to this neighborhood? Absolutely." Rowan smiled slightly. "Then buckle up. This is about to get messy." Messy was an understatement. 2 days later, unmarked vehicles rolled into Ironwood Acres, county inspectors, financial auditors, even 2 plainclothes investigators from the state attorney's office. They went straight to the HOA clubhouse, now technically under foreclosure, armed with warrants. Karen must have sensed it coming because when they arrived, she was already there, pacing out front like a caged lioness. The news crew wasn't far behind. I watched from across the street as the officers approached her. She started shouting before they even said a word. "This is harassment," she screamed. "You have no authority here. This is my property." One of the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to step aside. We have a court order." "Court order," she barked. "Show me." He did. Her face fell. In that single second, you could see the truth hit her like a truck. Her kingdom wasn't just crumbling, it was already gone. The officers led her inside, cameras followed. For the next hour, reporters broadcast the spectacle: live files being boxed up computers, confiscated HOA banners taken down. It was surreal, watching it unfold on my phone while it was happening just a few hundred feet away. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Karen burst out of the clubhouse doors in handcuffs. The cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. She thrashed against the officer's grip. "You think you've won, Hayes? You think you can destroy me? I built this neighborhood." I stepped forward, staying calm, the crowd parting as I approached. "No, Karen," I said quietly. "You built a trench and you fell right into it." Her eyes burned with fury, but for once she had no words. They put her into the back of the car and just like that, the HOA's reign ended with the sound of a door slamming shut. The fallout was immediate. The county froze the HOA's accounts. Residents demanded refunds for years of misused dues. The local paper ran a front-page story. HOA president arrested in fraud scandal. Resident owns association debt. Within days, Ironwood Acres became a national headline. News anchors debated it on morning shows. Online forums dissected every twist. I even saw a meme of the trench with the caption, "When you dig holes, make sure you're not standing in one." I should have felt victorious, vindicated, but honestly, I just felt tired. That evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset burn orange across the fields. The old windmill creaked in rhythm with the cicadas. For the first time in months, the air smelled like peace. Mike called. They're charging her with wire fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of funds, he said. She's looking at serious time. I nodded. Good. Maybe now people will think twice before weaponizing power over their neighbors. He paused. You realize technically you now own the HOA? I chuckled. Yeah, funny how that works. Any plans? He asked. Yeah, I said. I think I'll shut it down. The next week, I held a final community meeting. Open air. No microphones, no titles, just neighbors on folding chairs in my yard. I told them everything. The loan, the fraud, the foreclosure, the whole ugly mess. And when it was done, I said, the HOA is dissolved. You're free. Keep your lawns however you want. Paint your houses whatever color makes you happy. Just don't let fear run this place again. A wave of relief swept through the crowd. Some people clapped, others cried. For the first time in a long time, Ironwood Acres felt like a neighborhood again, not a regime. Afterward, Mrs. Dalton approached me with a smile. You know, she said softly, for someone they called the villain, you turned out to be the hero. I laughed. Heroes don't own liens, ma'am. She patted my arm. Maybe not. But heroes do. What's right when no one else will. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked out across my land. The trench was gone, replaced with a new flower bed filled with wild daisies. The soil was uneven, rough in places, but it was healing, just like the neighborhood. From the road, I could see the flashing lights of the last news van leaving. Thestery was over for everyone else. But for me, it had only just begun. Because sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from the quiet satisfaction of watching truth fill the very whole lies once occupied. And as I sat there, I realized the greatest irony of all. Karen had spent her life digging into other people's business. In the end, she just dug her own. It's strange how quickly chaos can fade into quiet. One day, the street is lined with cameras and sheriff's cruisers, and the next, all that's left is the faint smell of mud and diesel. For the first time in months, Ironwood Acres looked like what it was always supposed to be, a neighborhood, not a battlefield. Karen's arrest had made national headlines for a week straight, but like all scandals, it eventually became old news. The TV trucks packed up, the reporters left, and people returned to mowing lawns and grilling burgers. But beneath that new calm, something had changed, something deeper than fences or property lines. I could feel it every time I stepped outside. The looks that once carried suspicion now carried gratitude. People waved, kids shouted, "Hi, mister," haze from their bikes instead of avoiding my driveway like it was radioactive. The fear was gone, and the trench, or rather the place where it once carved through my land, had become something else entirely. I turned it into a flower bed, long and winding, planted with rows of wild daisies and lavender. It wasn't perfect. The soil was still uneven and rough in spots, but that somehow made it more honest. Every bloom felt like a small apology from the earth for what we'd all been through. Sometimes I'd stand there at dusk listening to the breeze hum through the windmill, and think about how something so ugly had given birth to something so peaceful. Karen's trial came faster than anyone expected. Mike kept me updated as things unfolded. The evidence was airtight. He told me forgery wire fraud, misappropriation of funds, it's all there. They even found she used HOA Duesto pay off her car. I sighed. The red SUV? Yep, paid in full with your neighbor's landscaping money. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. When the verdict finally came in guilty on all counts, I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just sat on my porch, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, staring out at the garden. Some part of me had expected to feel triumph. But instead, I felt something softer. Something like relief, and maybe a little sadness. Because in the end, even after everything she'd done, Karen was just Apperson. Someone who wanted control so badly that she'd forgotten how to coexist. After the trial, the county asked if I wanted to retain ownership of the HOA assets. I could have kept everything, the clubhouse, the pool, even the green belt land, but I didn't want any of it. I'm not here to rule anyone, I told them. I just want my neighborhood back. So, I dissolved the association entirely. The legal paperwork took weeks, but the effect was immediate. For the first time in decades, Ironwood Acres was officially free. No more dues, no more fines, No more Karen-style dictatorships. At first, people didn't know what to do with that freedom. Some worried it meant chaos. Unpainted mailboxes, mismatched fences, kids' toys left in yards. But slowly, they realized it meant something better. Trust. Neighbors started helping each other again. A retired carpenter fixed a broken porch for free. A group of teenagers repainted old street signs. Even the Daltons, who hadn't spoken to anyone in years, hosted a neighborhood cookout. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. A few weeks later, I got a letter handwritten. The return address stopped me. Cold County Correctional Facility, Block C. I almost threw it away. Almost. But curiosity won. Inside was a single page. No apologies, no excuses. Just online in Karen's neat looping handwriting. I still believe I was right, but maybe I dug too deep. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and slid it into a drawer. That was the closest thing to peace I was ever going to get from her. And maybe that was enough. One evening, not long after, the neighborhood gathered in my yard for a small celebration, part potluck, part farewell, to the HOA. Kids chased each other with sparklers while the adults shared stories about the old days when Karen ran things. Someone handed me a plate of barbecue and said, "You know, Robert, if you ever run for mayor, you've already got our votes." I laughed. One HOA is enough for a lifetime. Thanks. As the night stretched in, I noticed how the garden glowed faintly under the porch. Lights those flowers standing where the trench had once been rooted deep in the same soil that Karen had torn apart. It hit me then how symbolic it all was. Something born from damage thriving. Anyway, that's what recovery looks like. Not perfection, just persistence. Later that night, long after everyone had gone home, I stayed on the porch nursing one last cup of coffee. The stars above Ironwood were bright and endless. The kind of sky my father used to call a clean slate. I thought about him, about how he taught me to fix things with patience, not anger, about how he used to say, "The land remembers what you put into it." He was right. Karen had put in fear and control. I'd chosen truth and time, and the land, like always, reflected that. Before turning in, I took one last walk along the flower bed. The air smelled faintly of lavender. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, the sound echoing like a reminder that nature doesn't care about fences or bylaws. It just is. As I traced the curve of the garden, I saw something glint in the soil. A small rusty metal sign half buried near the edge. I knelt down and pulled it free. It was one of Karen's old HOA enforcement aria signs. Bent and faded, the paint peeling off. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I smiled, set it upright in the middle of the flowers, and whispered, "Rest in peace, Ironwood HOA." And maybe in that moment, it really did. If there's one thing this whole ordeal taught me, it's that power built on fear never lasts. You can control people with threats, fines, and fancy titles for a while, but eventually truth shows up with its receipts. Karen thought she could dig a trench deep enough to isolate me. What she didn't realize was that she was just building the walls of her own downfall. Sometimes revenge doesn't look like fire or fury. Sometimes it looks like patience, the kind that lets people expose themselves through their own arrogance. I learned that you can't always stop others from trying to bury you, but you can make sure they dig on the wrong side of the line. And if you wait long enough, those same trenches can become gardens. So to anyone dealing with your own HOA, Karen, remember this. You don't have to fight dirty to win. Let the truth do the digging. Let time do the talking. What would you have done if your HOA dug a trench around your house? Tell me in the comments below.